And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is August the 4th, 216th day of the year. 149 days remain of the year's over with. Well, let's talk about the holidays and observances on this date. National White Wine Day. National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day, Single Working Women's Day, and a National Owl Awareness Day, U.S. Coast Guard Birthday, show your support for the men and women of the Coast Guard, Terry Fox Day, honors the journey of a young man who inspired a nation. He's a Canadian athlete, began a cross-country run to raise money and awareness for cancer research. His spirit and determination touched the hearts of millions. 1,000 miles despite losing a leg to cancer. His goal was to fund cancer research and find a cure. Today, this day stands as a reminder of his dedication, selfless. Heritage Day in Alberta, the National Clouded Leopard Day. Raises awareness and helps unite the world in the fight to save the clouded leopard, species of big cat with a tragically decreasing population. Festival Monday, a Census Dog Day. Join an event like a dog walk or a fundraiser or even a dog show to appreciate the many tasks assistance dogs perform. Commerce Day, Hooray for Kids Day. Picnic Day. Well, there we go. In the Northern Territory of Australia. It's a celebration that brings people together to enjoy the great outdoors. It's a public holiday that offers various festivities, including giving residents a well-deserved break. Families and friends gather in parks and gardens and open spaces to indulge in picnics. Makes the most of their beautiful scenery. New South Wales Bank Holiday, British Columbia Day, Natal Day. For those who are not familiar with it, it's a celebration marking the birth of Nova Scotia. Time for locals and visitors to come together and honor the province's rich heritage and culture. Day has exciting events that appeal to all ages, making it a world holiday in the region. New Brunswick Day, Civic Holiday, Crayfish Party, World Breastfeeding Week, National Fishing Month, National Eisteddfod Whales. It is a celebration of Welsh culture. Brings together the best of the nation's music, literature, and performance arts. I may have pronounced it incorrectly, but it's National Eisteddfod of Wales. It's a week-long celebration. Step on Red Week, Flower Fair, Farmers Market Week, National Marine Week, and the National Assistance Dog Week, National Exercise with Your Child Week, and National Clown Week. If you want to see that, go to Congress. Simplify Your Life Week, Big Butterfly Count. Famous people born on this date: Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, who clamored to be a star, was so great it may have damaged the royal family of England. Barack Obama, Cole Sprouse, Dylan Sprouse, Billy Bob Thornton. Well, let's see what we got in the news. Texas governor is going to remove the Democrats from office since they fled the state to avoid a vote. He calls them derelict Democrats. Nancy Mace is The Republican firebrand has launched a bid to become South Carolina governor. She's entered the crowded Republican gubernatorial primary to succeed term-limited Governor Henry McMaster. Republican Dooley, son of legendary University of Georgia head coach Vince Dooley, expected to receive Governor Brian Kemp's endorsement in the Senate showdown. He's jumped into the Georgia Senate race, where touting support for Trump and taking aim at Ossoff. Democratic senator defends working with Trump after Booker's accused her of complicity. Cortez Masto says she's been fighting Trump since 2016 while defending law enforcement bills. Well, after that viral attack in Cincinnati, business owners are demanding accountability, while the powers that be are doing their best to soft pedal the whole thing. Well, armed robbers are targeted bar hoppers in Chicago. Woman says Chicago attackers held a gun to her head while demanding phone passwords and Cash App access. In the blue cities, they're becoming much more demanding. But police in Chicago are urging the residents to be cautious after there have been a slew of violent robberies targeting mainly drunk individuals in the city's River North neighborhood. According to Fox 32, at least 4 incidents are taken between June 16th and July 6th, with 1 to 3 African American males beating and robbing people. That's better for them than working, I guess. Montana bar massacres left 4 dead as search for a military veteran suspect continues. Michael Brown allegedly opened fire at the Owl Bar in Anaconda Friday morning before fleeing. They've identified the 4 victims who were shot and killed. Where an Army veteran allegedly opened fire at the Owl Bar. About 10:30 a.m. on Friday, 45-year-old Michael Brown allegedly entered the bar and opened fire, killed 59-year-old Daniel Edwin Bailey, 64-year-old Nancy Loretta Kelly, 70-year-old David Allen Leach, and 74-year-old Tony Wayne Palm, all of whom are residents of Anaconda. And then he turned and ran. He remains at large as search efforts continue in the Stumptown area just west of Anaconda, where the suspect was last seen. Wearing black shorts and in the photo that was taken of him. Nobody seems to be sure what led to the shooting. WWE Super Slam turned chaotic as a fan fight broke out in the stands, which was caught on video. It was hair pulling and punches and kicks. It was not the Cody Rhodes John Cena street fight. It was one just as exciting. Video posted at X captured what appeared to be 3 female fans going at it in the stands. And then the male fan grabbed one of the women and pulled her away from behind. The other man appeared to grab the male fan, and the 2 women from the ruckus engaged some hair pulling and punches. A total of 6 fans appeared to be directly involved, although only 1 woman was seen throwing punches in the video. One did land a kick on one of the men after security settled down most of the madness. Nobody seems to know what brought on the fight. Well, Dolly Parton altered the Playboy bunny outfit she wore for the magazine cover to respect religious fans. This was in 1978 when she posed on the cover of Playboy. Wish I'd seen that. Well, Lawrence Grobel, famous Florida interviewer, was a journalist who spoke to Parton about during the intimate, wide-ranging interview and diary entries he wrote at the time, which were originally shared with Vanity Fair. He explained that her and her team's thought process behind agreeing to the Playboy interview in the first place. Her manager, Sandy Gallman, told her Playboy is the classiest magazine to do an interview with. But there's some Bible-toting folks who are fans, and that concerns her. She'll pose for the cover if the bunny costume could be altered so the crotch can be lowered and she don't reveal too much of her chassis, so to speak. Well, the family's heartbroken as TV star Lenny Anderson died at age 79 after prolonged illness. She came out that she had made peace with her former husband, Burt Reynolds, before he died in 2018. After WKRP in Cincinnati, she did a lot of small parts. Boeing workers walk off the job in Missouri after rejecting a contract offer. 3,200 Boeing workers go on strike in 2 states. The company says it's ready for work stoppage with contingency plans using non-labor workers, or scabs as they're usually known. These workers on strike are in Missouri and Illinois. They rejected a 4-year labor agreement with the aerospace company. They assembled fighter jets. They turned down a 4-year contract that would have raised the average wage by about 40%, included a 20% general wage increase and $5,000 ratification bonus, according to Reuters. It included increasing periodic raises, more vacation time, and sick leave. Sounds to me like that was an offer made in heaven, but they turned it down. Well, the Tennessee murder suspect, Austin Drummond, 2 of his associates have been arrested. They apparently helped him escape. The reward's been increased to $17,500 as the manhunt continues. Giovanni Thomas, 28, and Tanaka Brown, 29, are both charged with accessory after the fact and first-degree murder in connection with the manhunt for Austin Drummond. Brown also faces 1 count of tampering with evidence. Allegedly, he killed 4 people last week in Tiptonville, a town about 125 miles from Memphis. Police said an infant later found on the front lawn of a random individual's house is related to all 4 victims, identified as family members of Drummond's girlfriend. U.S. Marshals are hot on this trail. Well, an illegal migrant with DUI rap sheet faces a vehicular homicide charges after being involved in a head-on crash that killed a mother and her daughter. ICE has lodged detainers against Raul Luna Perez to initiate removal proceedings in wake of a deadly wrong-way crash. Now, the problem is you can remove them all you want to, and before you know it, they're back, with well-meaning people helping them find that better life they claim they're looking for. Well, one CNN analyst calls Trump the most influential president in the last 100 years. He's certainly getting a lot accomplished. The New York Times, erroneous cover photo of a Gazan child who is supposedly being starved by the Israelis, joins a series of media blunders, framing stories against Israel. And all these errors by news outlets appear to all go in one direction. Hamas good, Israel bad. The headline said, young, old, and sick starved to death in Gaza. There was a picture of a malnourished infant child and his mother. The caption said, Mohammed Zakaria al-Matawak, about 18 months with his mother, who said he was born healthy, was recently diagnosed with terminal malnutrition. Doctors said a number of children dying of malnutrition in Gaza has risen sharply. Well, critics immediately called out the Times for prominently featuring Mohammed. His image was featured by numerous other media outlets. What they failed to mention was he has a genetic disorder. While malnutrition might actually be an issue, that was not the primary reason for his sickly appearance. Well, President Trump has commented on the Sydney Sweeney ad. Says, I love her ad, and it is quite attractive, let me tell you. Well, there's rumors that AOC plans to take the White House in 2028. She is drawing big crowds nationwide. Former Vice President Kamala Harris is seeing her support drop. There's talk of her running again in 2028. If AOC gets elected president, I think it's time to check how life is in Australia and New Zealand, because she is an absolute lunatic. Every picture I've ever seen of her looks like a big mouth bass. Her mouth is open, and she's ranting and raving at somebody. Well, Travis and Jason Kelsey's father's girlfriend died at age 74. Maureen McGuire grew an unexpected love for football later in life. Ed Kelsey, the father, had been dating Maureen McGuire, originally from the Bronx, for quite some time. Now, August is Wellness Month. Elevate your exercise routine with sleep essentials and neck massages and more. Alzheimer's researchers say targeting brain sugar could help protect against dementia. Breaking down stored glucose reduces toxic protein buildup linked to neurological disease, according to a study. Apparently, the brain has a hidden sugar code that could lead to better treatments for neurological diseases. Of course, if you look long and hard enough, you can find a study supporting almost anything you want to say. Well, fighter jets scrambled after a civilian aircraft violated Trump airspace at New Jersey, Bedminster. NORAD had to use flares to escort a civilian plane out of restricted zones over Bedminster. The pilot flew into a temporary flight restriction zone about 12:50 p.m. Eastern Time, according to a statement from the North American Aerospace Defense Command. NORAD aircraft escorted it out of the area. That was the second intercept of the day. Another aircraft entered the temporary flight restriction zone. In fact, in total, there were 5 unauthorized incursions over the weekend. Federal Reserve governors plan to slash interest rates, a descent not seen in 30 years. Fed chairman has been slammed for delusional thinking as high rates burden America. NFL legend Tom Brady is talking about unretirement. with cryptic social media posts. The View, that bastion of liberalism, has criticized Kamala Harris's post-campaign interview with Stephen Colbert. Now, there's been a warning from Greece. Mondami's rise mirrors a deadly cost. All his socialist plans could well be the undoing of what's left of our economy. But the liberal left loves him. Well, Hamas showed some pictures of Israeli hostage, emaciated and digging his own grave. Netanyahu has responded to that. Boat hit a whale off Jersey shore, killed the whale and threw the passenger into the water. Tropical storm Dexter forms off the U.S. East Coast. There's also 2 other areas where we may see major tropical storms. Well, bikini-clad Padma Lakshmi actually lit up social media with sizzling beach photos. I'm looking at one of her in a red, hot pink bikini. She's a model and a TV host. She's 54 years old. Couldn't tell it looking at the pictures. Let me tell you, well worth looking at. Well, Sydney Sweeney's making headlines in other areas besides blue jeans. She put her impressive gun skills on display. The libs are absolutely coming unglued. She's a Hollywood starlet, continues to be attacked by the woke mob over her American Eagle ad campaign. Of course, the people trying to bring her down seem to be failing in a big way. An American Eagle refused to bend knee, which is amazing. Apparently, people with common sense are holding the line. It's clear people had enough of the woke nonsense. They claim her ad is pushing Nazi eugenics. It's all about an American woman wearing blue jeans. Simple, straightforward. And in addition to looking good in jeans, she's a good shot. Well, President Trump has claimed that the Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner's job may have been, he may have had a thumb on the scale. The numbers were the biggest miscalculation in over 50 years. The president accused Erica McIntyre of falsifying employment data. I find it fascinating that even after Biden is out of office and President Trump is doing what appears to be a good job, they're still attacking him, trying to make him look bad and Biden look good. Charlemagne the God is urging the Democratic Party to throw the old regime completely under the bus. It's we got some real crazy people behind the microphones. He is, in addition to being a rapper, he's doing a podcast. Well, we've been looking at stories about UFOs, and I've got a series of articles originally published in various websites that deal with some very weird subjects. Cryptozoology, UFOs, aliens, kinds of things that when you associate them with UFOs are immediately ignored. Supposedly in 1969, when Project Blue Book was closed down, um, the very idea of UFOs was ignored. That was the end. No more research. In actuality, what happened is a more accepted term was unidentified aerial phenomena. And that's got black budgets, and that's got budgets and everything you can imagine. Well, truth be known, cryptozoology and UFOs and aliens are studied by U.S. government scientists in the Defense Intelligence Agency's Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. That's a mouthful. The study started in earnest in 2008. Now, you may think this is far out. Some of it is extremely bizarre. But the subject of UAP and NHI are now considered respectable, as long as you don't mention UFO. We can't talk about that. Now, interestingly enough, one of the reasons for that respectability may actually be Tom DeLonge, pop rock star of the band Blink-182. He set in motion events that led to the famous New York Times piece exposing the existence of a Department of Defense UAP program in 2017. And it eventually culminated in congressional testimony of David Grush in 2023. He was a whistleblower who stated that the United States is in possession of NHI craft, NHI bodies. Has been engaged in reverse engineering programs of questionable legality for decades, hid behind waived, unacknowledged special access programs and corporate secrecy. Grush worked for the National Reconnaissance Office and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Been tasked by the UAP task force to find these programs, and according to the reports, he did. Another place to look for information is watching Australian investigative journalist Ross Cawthorne's keynote speech at the 2024 conference by the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. He joins a long list of journalists taking the subject very seriously. When I was speaking at Roswell, before I became politically unacceptable, I used to talk about the fact that there were these programs. Of course, the individual who got control of the board and was unhappy that I was outselling him didn't want anything I had to say to be too well known. Well, the Overton window refers to politics, categorizing ideas on a spectrum from unthinkable to actual policy. You never find any member of the American political class arguing for a strategic partnership with North Korea or the Taliban. Not since we got Biden out of office. Between these extremes are ideas that can at least be mentioned in debate, even if they're not realistically be considered. Now, according to Wikipedia, Overton, I'm talking about the Overton window. Well, let me back up. You have to ask yourself how we got to where we're at right now. And to get there, you have to talk about worldview warfare. Well, the German term for translated into English as psychological warfare, and this all came about post-World War II. And that's where we get the Overton window hacking, or maybe the Hallin sphere engineering. Both terms seem to work. But the central idea is the deliberate shaping of which elements made for acceptable discourse. There's certain things that the powers that be do not want us discussing, one of which is UFOs. Now, the Overton window, as I said earlier, refers to politics categorizing ideas on a spectrum from unthinkable to actual policy. Never find any member of the American political class arguing, as I said, for a strategic partnership with North Korea or the Taliban. It's just not done, though Biden was doing it. Now, according to Wikipedia, as I started to say, Overton's colleague John Lehman said the most common misconception is that lawmakers themselves are in the business of shifting the Overton window. And that's not true. Lawmakers are actually in the business of detecting where the window is and moving to be in accordance with it. The window shifts from those outside of it, persuade enough people to move the idea from the unthinkable or radical into the acceptable or even the sensible. I saw a lot of that when I was in the military years ago. And this has been the case with unidentified aerial phenomena, to the point that for the past several years there's been an unprecedented bipartisan push in both the Senate and the House for something amounting to disclosure. Existing legislation now includes whistleblower protections. There was a UAP task force, now a UAP office. It's got a bizarre name, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. There are now UAP reporting requirements for the armed services, and a law mandating the UAP files from all agencies have to be turned over to the National Archives for eventual public release. Back when I had my encounter and my UFO gunfight, I was told that quit talking about it if you want to remain an officer. I said, how about the 2,500 rounds we expended shooting at him? Inventory miscount. Okie dokie. Well, all this came about as a result of informal lobbying, as well as dozens of individuals from within the program. Grush discovered, giving classified testimony to the Senate and the House Intelligence and Armed Services Committees, as well as to the Office of the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. Now, I've discovered, in dealing with the VA, that House and Senate committees are about as useful as a rubber crutch. They don't do anything. Now, Hallin spheres, by contrast, describe similar boundaries within media discourse. The sphere of consensus surrounded by the sphere of controversy, surrounded by the sphere of deviance. To 2017, UAP unidentified aerial phenomena almost exclusively fell within the sphere of deviance. Now, there have been a few open and disagreeable journalists taking the topic seriously, but by and large, it's been treated as by serious journalists as just kooky and worthy of only ridicule and contempt. Now, according to a quote from Wikipedia, Hallin argues that in the sphere of deviance, journalists also depart from standard norms of objective reporting and feel authorized to treat as marginal and laughable and dangerous. They either avoid mentioning or else they ridicule the controversial subject as outside the bounds of acceptable controversy, and they censor the individuals and groups who are associated with it. Now, the journalists and media figures that we've talked about are a contemporary anomaly. This wasn't always the case. For years, starting in the late 40s, you could find serious stories about flying saucers and UFOs in practically every newspaper in the world. But in 1953, something changed. The CIA convened the so-called Robertson panel, which came to a predetermined conclusion: UFOs were bunk, made the recommendation, which in retrospect has guided the last 60 plus years of official worldview messaging. The panel's concept of a broad educational program integrating efforts of all concerned agencies was that it should have two major aims: training and debunking. Now, the debunking aim would result in reduction in public interest in flying saucers, which today evokes a strong psychological reaction. Education would be accomplished by mass media such as TV and motion picture and popular articles. The basis of this education would be actual case histories that have been puzzling at first but later explained. It was felt strongly that psychologists familiar with mass psychology should advise on the nature and extent of the program. In other words, the Robertson panel was designed to make it all go away. It was another whitewash. Now, not so ironically, the Department of Defense's ARROW is still following this CIA psychological warfare script. They present only resolved cases and give the misleading impression that with enough data, all cases can be resolved. Now, this is not the case. It's never been the case. And AARO, led by disgraced former director Sean Kirkpatrick, had to deliberately distort the historical record in order to give this impression. In fact, one of the studies cited in their historical report as support for this came to the opposite conclusion. The better the observations, the more qualified the observer, and the higher the likelihood the sighting will remain unidentified, the deeper it gets buried. Now, to anybody with even a passing familiarity with a typical sighting report, this is obvious. There is a point at which conventional explanations approach a probability of zero. And yet, despite over 70 years of such reports worldwide, tens of thousands of them, many in politics and media, the general population still fall for intellectual sleight of hand. Nothing here to see. Go away. Official denial and ridicule from all nodes of consensus culture, combined with the obvious reality of the phenomena, even if its origins are mysterious, led to something very curious developing over the decades. Ignoring reality simply doesn't make it disappear. It has to go someplace. What we've seen since 1953 is the deliberate creation of a perceptual or worldwide bubble, the boundary of which has been practically impervious to mainstream penetration. This process and the maintenance of the resulting boundaries have been aided by dishonest journalists and the inexhaustible supply of debunkers devoted to enforcing the boundary like their lives or perhaps their livelihood depends on it. In the past, we have people such as Donald Menzel's and Philip Klass, both of whom had close ties to the intelligence community, which meant they were getting money from the intelligence community. Today we got Mick West and Stephen Greenstreets, who have joined the debunking group. What otherwise could and would have been a natural shifting in humanity's collective worldview to accommodate the reality of unidentified aerial phenomena was forced into a kind of hermetic subculture, developing parallel to consensus worldviews. Those on the outside aren't even aware it exists, and they do see some hints of its existence. They tend to assume it's all a bunch of hokum and don't bother to look any closer. And if they do look closer, the material is so far outside their current understanding of the world that they dismiss it as impossible and conclude the author had to be either crazy or trying to pass off fiction as nonfiction. Well, these divergent ontologies are now converging, and barely is anybody noticing. Well, the world of the UFO, or the subculture, if you will, wasn't born fully formed like some Greek god. Since the very beginning, unidentified aerial phenomena, to use the current accepted term, has been weird, which places the subject outside the sphere of consensus, since not everybody agrees they even exist. Now, even though among those who followed the mystery and attempted to solve it. It took decades for the wider field to assimilate its weirder and more mind-boggling aspects into the growing deviant consensus. See, the early newspaper reports and research focused almost exclusively on what were called sightings. Usually they were distant sightings. Those experiences, most amenable to prosaic explanations, are forced debunking. It might have been anomalous lights in the sky, or mystery fireballs, or star-like objects moving like intelligently piloted craft. And that's where the term flying saucers came from in 1947, the sighting by Kenneth Arnold. The newspapers dubbed what he saw as flying saucers. Metallic, dish-shaped objects moving in ways that defied known flight technologies. Add to that metallic spheres and cigar-shaped objects and numerous other morphologies reported by military men and pilots and police officers, professionals, and regular citizens. Now, something up in the sky, something easily debunked by Menzies and Class and his group. That's one thing. But what happens when those lights in the sky land? Again, we get reports of saucer, egg-shaped craft sighted on land. Initially, they were considered a bit too much, even for many UFO researchers. One of them said, "I like my UFOs or my flying saucers in the sky, not down here on the earth with us." So occupant reports were considered taboo until the 1960s. And then it took an additional couple of decades for claims to be taken aboard one of these things to gain widespread acceptance. Now, J. Allen Hynek, astronomer, debunker, who turned proponent, had been hired by Project Blue Book. He famously categorized reports as close encounters. And he had the first, the second, and third kinds. These corresponded to up-close sightings, the first kind, and physical effects were the second kind, and occupant reports were the third kind. When I wrote my book, I came up with the fourth kind. Sexual encounters. Steven Spielberg brought that terminology into pop culture in 1977. Now, officially, there is close encounters of the fourth kind are abductions, and close encounters of the fifth kind are communications. They've been added to the list. And needless to say, the higher up the number is, the further it's going to fall outside the sphere of consensus. That's likely the report will go mainstream, and it's going to further enforce the worldview boundary by covering it up, which is something our government is an expert at. Nowadays, you can have a conversation with a PhD level unidentified aerial phenomena researchers and find yourself wondering if you stepped into a science fiction movie. In the 1980s, introduced ideas like crash retrievals, reverse engineering, and covert agreements between government and aliens, cattle mutilation, underground bases, alien abductions. It's already said, most of these elements were present from the very beginning, but rejected as being just too far out there to be taken seriously, even by those who studied UFOs. Nowadays, you can find academic discussions debating the merits of extraterrestrial, cryptoterrestrial, extraterrestrial, and interdimensional hypothesis. Well, there's theoretical physics discussions behind debating possible propulsion technologies to account for the observed capabilities. And the further this worldview diverged from the consensus, when I say consensus, that means what the government wants you to think, the harder reconciliation becomes. Asking somebody with no prior familiarity with the topic to accept an occupant report is a lot harder today than it was for somebody in the 1940s to accept a distant flying saucer. And all the while, ufology is going down these rabbit holes. The Fisher cultures stuck in place, believing the most facile and lazy debunking efforts of the intel community. Their collaborators, and those folks I like to refer to as useful idiots. Oh, I've dealt with a lot of those, especially since I started writing about UFOs. You can find my books on Amazon, both hard copy and ebooks. Look up Ken Hudnall. Well, if you read case after case, the story is almost always the same. You got a witness, usually somebody out in the country, like my favorite character, Cletus. Before I saw that damn flying saucer, I thought the whole subject was crazy. Used to make fun of everybody who said they saw it. Then there it was. Now I know it was real. Now I know what I saw. Now the media likes to get the most bizarre looking person to interview. They'll have Cletus in his bib overalls and his work boots. And they'll say, well, what did it look like? It looked like a booger with legs. And then they just rake him over the coals of embarrassment. I've not seen an interview done by mainstream media that hasn't been an attempt to make the witness look foolish. And that attitude, as I saw the thing, I thought it was crazy to begin with, now I believe it's true. That's the case of a majority of the witnesses. The only thing that changed their minds was seeing it for themselves. Of course, direct witnesses aren't the only ones whose minds can be changed. There's a lot of scientists who've been drawn to the subject based purely on the evidence, such as James MacDonald and contemporary historian Richard Dolan. Carl Jung, incidentally, is also fascinated by the topic. Contrary to popular opinion, ruled out a purely psychological explanation. But by and large, it's personal experience that tears down the worldview barriers, but it permits entry into what's been referred to as Hallin's hypersphere by way of the Overton wormhole. Once you enter this different world, so to speak, it's very hard to leave. Chances are you won't be able to take anyone with you. And this fact has been weaponized by debunkers. Until recently, it was common to hear scientists say things like no credible accidents or no credible scientists will take this subject seriously. Except there's always been credible scientists taking the subject seriously, both in top secret and civilian worlds. There's an unspoken rule, though. Any scientist once considered credible automatically loses their credibility when they let people know they're interested in UFOs. So the debunker's statements has the advantage of always being true. Doesn't matter how world class in your field you were before. You start talking about UFOs and you go to the bottom of the list. You know, I used to do ghost tours here in El Paso. It's the most haunted city in the country. I did them for 20 years. And I took a lot of people around and showed them a lot of haunted locations. And then we had a guy show up. He read my books, memorized the stories that I told, and started doing his own tours. And his main goal in life was to, in his words, debunk all the stories that I told. And how did he debunk them? He made up facts, or what he called facts. And when asked why he was doing it, he said it's an easy way to make money. Give people what they want, whether it's true or not. You know, the message has become very clear. Even unidentified aerial phenomena witnesses understand that game. They know if they go public with what they saw, they'll be called crazy. Their mental health will be brought into question. They might lose their jobs, and their family members may not believe them. And these are the reasons that so many scientists keep their interest in the subject secret for decades. Of course, that's starting to change a little bit. But that's why so many witnesses never bother to go public with what they've seen. Some don't even tell their closest family members. Another debunker tactic comes straight out of the Robertson panel and is currently utilized by the Department of Defense's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Office. It comes from their training recommendation. The training aim would result in proper recognition of unusually illuminated objects, such as balloons or aircraft reflections, as well as natural phenomena, meteors, fireballs, mirages, strange clouds. The term flying saucer was actually too specific. Too many sightings involved morphologies that weren't dish-shaped. Unidentified flying objects solved the problem at the expense of specificity, and the same goes for unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, while the term UFO, while general enough to encompass both flying saucers and misidentified seagulls, it's also general enough that the debunkers get away with suggesting it could be identified if there was just enough data. And they're not above making up data. If you look at the Roswell crash, General Ramey in his photograph of the weather balloon, from Jesse Marcel's son, I found out his father told him that the true debris was hidden away and a weather balloon was spread out in the office to be photographed by the reporters. Give them what they want. To the uninitiated, those who've never seen a UAP for themselves, this might work. For those who have had their worldview blown open by an actual sighting, it's actually laughable. Now, there's no mistaking a flying saucer or a matte black triangle or a tic-tac or a metallic sphere, demonstrating positive lift, instantaneous acceleration, right-angle turns, and hypersonic velocities, or lacking any propulsion signature for a wayward birthday balloon or swamp gas. And that was one of my favorite explanations. Swamp gas. In the jungle in Panama, standing on that hill shooting at that thing, I was told by the colonel it was swamp gas. There wasn't a swamp within 50 miles. But if that segment that takes official pronouncements and consensus seriously gets the impression that all UAP reports are just distant jets and optical illusions and seagulls and sensor errors, well, the government's accomplished its mission. These explanations provide a suitably plausible rationalization to uphold the common worldview without any unnecessary ontological shock. Debunkers use such reverse blockades, or big lies, so to speak, to convince onlookers that the witness didn't see what he knows he saw. And it works. So after over 70 years of disinformation, official culture is still stuck in the must have been a stray pelican mistaken for a 30-foot domed disc hovering 20 feet above the neighbor's house mindset, while ufologists were debating whether the beings operating the damn thing were human, alien, AI, ultra-terrestrial, or some other exotic unknown. That's where we were in 2017 when the AATIP story broke and the To the Stars Academy was launched with Lou Elizondo. At that point in time, UAP researchers had some criticism of how To the Stars framed the controversy. Those early years of 2017 to 2020, very little mention was made of any of the 20th century history. As if the unidentified aerial phenomena started showing up in 2024 with the infamous Tic Tac videos. 1947 all over again. Many of the same talking points. Some folks saw this narrative as an attempt to pull the wool over the eyes of the public once again, to pretend this was a recent phenomena that caught U.S. military and intelligence off guard, and an attempt to gloss over the prior history and any inconvenient implications. Like the evidence there was a decades-long disinformation campaign. Nope, government wanted to start with a clean slate. But in retrospect, it became pretty clear what they were doing. Having reverse engineered the Overton Hallin history of ufology, they were putting the managerial class and general public through a time-compressed recapitulation of the process starting from the beginning. They started out with the U.S. military has regularly encountered unknown aircraft demonstrating remarkable capabilities outclassing our state-of-the-art. Maybe they're Russian, maybe they're Chinese, or maybe they were something other. But whatever it may have been, it's a potential national security threat. It needs to be taken seriously. Then it comes out that they're probably not Russian or Chinese because they've encountered them as well, and they're puzzled. Then they discuss the fact the UFO debris question gets examined again. Well, while all this is going on, we got Grush, who came out as a whistleblower, said world governments have crashed UAPs in their possession since at least the 1930s. Some of these craft have contained non-human bodies. Defense contractors have been studying and reverse engineering the tech and special access programs, not congressional oversight. The U.S. and the world public has been subjected to a decades-long disinformation campaign. The U.S. has been engaged in a reverse engineering Cold War with Russia and China, and there may have been agreements to some sort of between the government and the aliens. Now, this was, from the government's point of view, a smart way to do things, the only way for it to work. If the collective worldview had been artificially stuck in the late 40s, approached the situation as if it were the 1940s, taken through the same stages of ufology went through over the decades. And to be perfectly frank, it has worked. Even such places as the UFO Museum in Roswell, which had all the information at its disposal, was kept in the 1940s by a man who saw himself as a prominent writer and the only knowledgeable individual on UFOs. If you disagreed with him, you were out. Just 7 years, and unprecedented, but still small number of the American elite class, that's government and the media, largely assimilated about 30 to 40 years of ufology, and some aspects are firmly within the Overton window of actual policy. Others are currently within the Hallin sphere of controversy. Not yet consensus, but the subject of serious debate. The 2024 National Defense Authorization Act included draft legislation that would have given the U.S. government eminent domain over any non-human technology or craft in the possession of private citizens or corporations. Luckily, that provision got axed in conference. If it was added, that means, golly gee whiz, the government knows they're real. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be talking about more subjects in this field in tomorrow's show. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.